Thanks for having me, everybody. I apologize. I fit in the category of this being my first time to the group. I'm real excited about the conversation and bringing my perspective to it, because this is professionally what I think about, is the intersection of technology, education, and equity. Before telling a little bit about my work, start with something that I think that we can all agree on, is the opportunity that's out there because of how education has been lifted up by technology in the last several years. So we still have a lot to learn and a lot to fine-tune, but the general research supports that technology, when done right, can support student learning. So we're at real important critical juncture of where our students, especially those most at risk, can take advantage and get equal access as their peers and really take off with their learning with the support of technology. And schools are also embracing this as changing their learning models, redesigning what teaching and learning looks like. So we're getting research coupled with movement in sometimes hard to move bureaucracies at our schools. And the last element is linked to parent engagement. We know that both through research and anecdotally, a strong school is a school where the parents are engaged with the learning and they are really in tune with what's going on in the school. And we're seeing a lot of opportunity coming out of schools being able to add on to their traditional ways of communication with digital ways of gathering families and engaging them and keeping them in the know. So starting with that, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of energy around ed tech right now. And so from my perspective, I want to make sure that we don't miss the big challenge that's in front of us. And that is not ignoring access to technology at home. So as our schools get more robust and move forward with technology in their plans, we need to pay close attention that we're not leaving big gaps of students behind with their access to technology outside of school. And so I have a couple of stark stats for us. These are California-wide figures. For families that have income less than $20,000, only 49% of those families have internet access with a computer at home. So that's an important subgroup that we can't lose track of. Spanish-speaking Latino families, 42% of that subpopulation has internet access with a computer at home. And again, another important population as we look to break the poverty chain is those without a high school diploma. Families in that category have only 34% of them with internet and technology at home. So we can't miss this because it's crucial to us having an equitable education that is promoted and driven by technology. We, on a more regional scale, my organization did a joint study with Oakland Unified School District a couple years ago. And across the board, we found that 40% of families don't have access. But you can see that it's skewed towards, in Oakland, the flats. So schools that are along the 880 corridor have 50% or more of their families that don't have access. And it's really hard to do any sort of innovative, digitally driven homework if the students are going home and they don't have that. A couple of things that we know is that purchasing technology for the students and sending them home with it, that's not the answer. It's not a device problem that we're dealing with. There's cultural issues, there's parental supports that we need to build in. I think we need to recognize that this isn't boiled down to let's buy a Chromebook or an iPad for every student. It's much more complex than that. Another piece is a good impetus to get families connected is because of how it benefits student learning. But let's not miss all of the other social impacts that technology can have at home. So I think that there's equal importance for the parent to get connected and online for their development as there is for the student. And we're not going to be able to solve this problem with a light switch. So as we're building up capacity and as we're getting more families online, I don't want us to miss that we need to, as a community, make sure that there's robust access for families to go to public spaces to get connected and look at the internet. So a little bit about what we do. I'm from an organization called Oakland Technology Exchange, and we work to solve these very issues. We work primarily with schools in Alameda and Contra Costa County, and we help them out with affordable internet. So we connect them with $10 a month internet plans. We offer them a free computer. We can do that because we're a large refurbisher. We have a 20,000 square foot warehouse where we accept donated computers from businesses and government agencies. We refurbish them and then provide them back out to the community for free. And then we offer the services of training, so some digital literacy workshops and training to get families in the right direction with their digital skills. And then we want them to stay connected and feel supported as they're progressing and using technology at home. So we also provide them free tech support for the first year to make sure that they have that safety net and they're feeling comfortable, and then they can't remember what life was like without a computer and internet at home. So quick look at our regional impact. We provide about 2,500 computers per year out to the community. And so we're growing. We were predominantly in Oakland, but now we're working across the East Bay. And when you zoom in on the Oakland neighborhood, you can see that we have a pretty powerful impact almost on a street level of families that are receiving a free computer and getting online. So working with schools in these regions, they're seeing all ships rise. Their grades are going up. Their parent engagement is going up. Like, they're really excited about what we have to offer. We have a solution, but either it's not a regional fit or it doesn't work within your community. So I want to encourage us all to walk away with, how can you individually approach and think about closing the divide? And so I implore you to collect a lot of data. On a classroom level, make sure you have a firm understanding of what students do and do not have access. Know your resources, know who you can turn to get help with what internet options are out there, how can I get my students low-cost technology. And then a key one is the third one, tie your technology to other goals, because families are reluctant to just jump on board technology for technology's sake. But if you have a STEM night, have an informational night around technology, access to that. So we've found a lot of success by linking it to other activities or other goals that the school has. And know your community partners, public housing, parks and rec centers, the mayor's office, get to know whoever you need to get to know to help link arms and address this issue. There's my contact info and us as the organization. Thanks for giving me your time. Appreciate it.
That was absolutely perfect, Seth, because I think even though you haven't been here, you hit on so many themes that we've been discussing throughout the quarter. I'm very excited to now introduce our panel. We're going to go into some more depth on this topic of homeschool connections. We're going to start with our very own Amber Levinson, who is a research associate at Stanford. She helps lead the TELOS initiative. She's also a postdoctoral scholar at the Joan Ganz Cooney Center, a Sesame workshop, where she contributes to the Families and Media Project. Her recent research examines how Hispanic Latino immigrant families use media and opportunities for technology to support intergenerational language learning. And her own background is in language learning, media education, media production, and she has a doctorate from the GSE. So wonderful to hear from Amber. Eric Cuentos is director of the Parent Partner Program Mission Graduates, which is a nonprofit organization that has the goal of increasing the number of K-12 students in San Francisco's Mission District who are prepared for and complete a college education. So a longitudinal perspective. Eric seeks to develop the capacity of Latino parents to be strong partners in their children's academic success and effective advocates for educational needs of all children in their school communities, especially those of English language learner students. Through his 3.5 years in this position, Eric has grown the program to have an on-site presence at 9 different elementary, middle, and high schools in the Mission District and surrounding neighborhoods, with a background in community and economic development and civic engagement in immigrant communities. He's continued to seek out opportunities throughout his career to support the self-determination and increased agency of historically marginalized communities. So we are very happy to have Eric as well. And then we've got Ben York, who is going to be our third speaker. He's the executive director of CEPA Labs, a branch of the Center for Education Policy Analysis at Stanford. That also is focusing on the intersection of technology and learning, but also behavior change. His research focuses on technology to help students and educators, broadly defined, overcome behavioral barriers associated with beneficial practices. So we're going to hear about the large-scale randomized controlled work of a literacy-focused text messaging intervention for low-income parents of preschoolers, which he co-developed with Susanna Loeb. And we'll hear about the positive learning gains that they have found out about and their new work that they're starting and developing, interventions that are exciting to hear about. So welcome, Ben. And then Carlin Llorente is Director of Media and Learning Research in SRI's Education for Center for Technology and Learning. His research focuses on how developmentally appropriate media can support mathematics and science learning across formal and informal settings, how children learn by engaging with emerging educational media and technology, and how collaborative engagement with adults and peers can be a catalyst for learning. He is SRI's PI for evaluation research of the PBS Ready to Learn initiative, and he co-leads the Life Center's Joint Engagement with Media project, which is a collaborative effort that we've all engaged in, which has just ended. But it's we're very excited to have his perspective here. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, and we'll start with Amber.
Oh, no. Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here, and thank you, Bridget, for the introduction. Where she went. I'm honored to be part of this incredible group today. So my recent research has focused on Hispanic Latino immigrant families and how they use media and technology at home in their communities for learning. And among the many things that I've found spending time with families is how families are making use of technology to bridge home and school. So that's a lot of what I'm going to focus on today. So to give you a little bit of context in my work as part of the Families in Media initiative, which is led by the Joan Ganz Cooney Center, along with Stanford and several other universities, one of the things we study is how families learn with media, but we're also really interested in thinking about how media and technology, how these tools can help foster interactions between family members instead of keeping each person alone together on their devices. And as I was studying these topics, I became really interested in what role does media play for families that have more than one language or culture. So, for example, early research on Sesame Street was showing that parents who were English learners were using Sesame Street, were watching Sesame Street with their kids to try and improve their own English. And as I was looking into this, many people, immigrants, including members of my own family, talked about how they did this. They watched children's media over their kids' shoulders to try to learn in this way. So I began to ask, what about now, right, that we have all these different forms of media available? How might they be supporting dual language learners at home? And so we, over the years, we have learned a lot about technology in family life, and just a few things are 94% of low and moderate income families access the internet at home in some way, although the quality of access is varied, and that really gets to what the number that Seth showed was very different, right? Because a lot of families are accessing the internet through mobiles now, so this number is a lot higher, but it's including mobile access. Children 0 to 8 spend over 2 hours a day with screen media, or more than that, depending on the study that you look at. So it's quite a lot of time. And technology in the home has been linked to student outcomes with language minority students, but we don't really know why. We don't know what content and what practices are important for this learning. What's really making that difference so that we can help families know what to do. And we're only really beginning to learn about this, about what families are actually doing with media. In large part, we have data about devices or what kind of internet connection people have, and even some data, as I mentioned, showing this relationship between having a computer at home and children's cognitive development. But we don't know about how families are using what they have. We don't know a lot about these details. So I began to do ethnography, working in the homes of low-income Hispanic Latino immigrant families who are a particularly interesting group to study when it comes to media. First, because they comprise a very large underserved population in our country, and also they're adopting digital technologies very rapidly. And I'm really thinking of media here not as an activity that a child does on his or her own, but I'm looking at what is the role in the family life? What's going on when the media is there? And in thinking about these questions, I draw on a learning ecology's perspective pioneered by Bridget Barron, which suggests the importance of the whole array of settings that children spend time in, and the ways in which learning outside school relates to in-school learning and vice versa. So it builds on Bronfenbrenner's foundational work, the ecological perspective on development. So since there's little in-depth work about the home context, in particular, I focused on that. Spending time in with families in their homes, but with an eye toward the connections between different settings, so the connections between home and school and so forth. So for today's talk, I'm just going to talk about a very small, percentage of the findings that I have, but I'm going to focus on these 4 main points. So first, as you might expect, media and technology are very present in families' lives. And in particular, Latino immigrant families, in my research at least, use media strategically to teach and learn language. So I'll talk about that. Also talk about how families use technology to make bridges between home and school in a variety of ways. Technology has the potential to help create more connections between home and school, I believe. And this is an important point. It's not only to help families understand schooling, but to help educators understand families as well. So I'm really thinking about creating the connections that go both ways. And then finally, access to quality digital content can be a challenge, and parents want more information and support. And this is not restricted only to immigrant families, for sure. So the first of the 4 points about using media strategically to teach and learn language. I'll just share with you an example. One mom, Karina, told me the following. I asked her, what value do media programs have for your daughter? What does she get out of them? And she told me, so she can speak more English, because at the beginning she didn't speak much English. Now it's like little by little she has progressed, and I put things on in both languages for her. And she tells me, she asks about things, and sometimes she teaches me things because I don't know English, and there are things she teaches me. So this really gets at how parents not only use media as a tool for their child's language development, whether it's to learn English or to reinforce Spanish, but also that these media programs served as the basis for conversations and also placed the child in the role of a teacher or a broker of understanding for the parent. And in my research, all the children were elementary school age, early elementary, so this is beginning really early on. And the second point, families are using technology to make bridges between home and school. So I thought that was really one of the most interesting things that I found in my research, was understanding these practices among families. So one example here, you see Naomi, who's 8 years old, and she's in 3rd grade. And it's homework time, and her mother, Laura, is helping her work on a math word problem that she was assigned for homework. Except that the word problem is written in English, and the mom, Laura, speaks mostly Spanish. So her method, and that of several of the other parents that I've worked with, was to use Google Translate to translate the word problem or parts of it that she didn't understand into Spanish. And in that process, she actually negotiated the meaning of the problem along with her daughter, who understands parts of it, and she also introduced her daughter to using the tool on her own to support her own learning. And once Laura understood what the problem was asking, then she could support her daughter in figuring out which operations to use to solve the math. And of course, as if you've used internet translators, they don't always give you the right translation, but the family had this kind of awareness about that, how it worked, and triangulating the meaning by putting in different amounts of the sentence and so forth. So I think this is a very innovative use of technology to solve problems. And McDermott and Rayleigh have called this kind of practice ingenuity in tight circumstances, where families are using creative solutions to solve the problems that they come up against using the resources that they have. And translators is really interesting. Besides being used for homework translation, they were also something that families just used for learning language in general. So here you see Brandon, who is 6 years old, with his dad. And Brandon was he's first grader. He was really curious and inquisitive kid, and he would come home having heard all of these new English words. He'd come home from school, and all these words were bouncing around in his head. So he would ask his dad about the words, and they would turn to Google Translate to try to figure out what these words were. And what that offered was the ability to speak the word into the device, to not have to know how to spell it, but be able to speak it, find the word, explore its different meanings, and then they could also hear the word spoken back to them by the device. So that was valuable to a lot of the families. And definitely translators weren't the only tools that families were using to connect home and school. One thing that I found really interesting was the way that technology could also help children bring interests from one setting into another. So an example of that was with Brandon, the same child from before. He, as I said, was very curious, and he was really excited about history and people from history that he would hear about in school. So for example, Martin Luther King Jr. or Cesar Chavez, he would hear about these people in his classes, and he would come home and he'd say, "Dad, where was this person, and did they have children, and this and that?" And oftentimes the parents didn't have those answers, and so they would go to YouTube and they would look up these people. They would be able to find documentaries or hear them speaking and so forth. So that was a really interesting way that the technology was allowing the child's interests to travel from the school into the home and be explored more deeply. And by the way, YouTube was used for all kinds of things. It's basically an encyclopedia. If you're looking for a hairstyle or a recipe or a way to fix something that's broken, that was pretty much where families turned. And in one particular part of my research, I introduced a set of language and literacy tools to families. So that just showed another way in which interest could travel using technology. So Brandon used the Reading Rainbow library app to find books about these historical people that he was interested in. And he actually also recognized on the Reading Rainbow app that there was the series of biographical picture books that his teacher had in the classroom. And he saw that same series on the Reading Rainbow library and was really excited about that. And so that drew him in to explore it. So to get to my third point, technology has the potential to help create more connections home to school and school to home. One example is the way that families were producing media. Media production also went on in homes. For example, one 8-year-old admired the Nickelodeon show iCarly, where the main character has her own show. And so that inspired her to create her own talk show at home, where she and her 6-year-old brother would go over topics from conserving the environment to explaining the geography of their neighborhood from their apartment window. And home videos that recorded family moments were also really powerful. So these little girls that you see here, they loved to watch the older sister's preschool graduation video many times. And they loved to point out Amanda, the older sister, singing songs and appearing on the screen. So this really brings up the question for me of how, from a funds of knowledge perspective, these artifacts that families are recording might become ways of letting educators learn about students. And also, I wonder how schools can tap more into this excitement around media characters and stories to support learning. Okay, and finally, access to quality digital content can be a challenge, and parents want more information and support. So although we see families doing a lot of really interesting and innovative things with technology, they also feel often very overwhelmed by all of the tools that are out there, and what do they choose, and what will support their children's learning, what will help them with something that they're facing in school right now, for example. And this isn't just immigrant parents, but across ethnic and economic backgrounds, we've heard this as a challenge. And particularly with Latino families, we're seeing them on national research indicate more of a desire for information about media for their children than other groups. So here we have 3 white, Black, and Latino families. And the Latino families are expressing more of a desire for this information. And within the Hispanic Latino demographic, the Spanish-only speakers are expressing a particular desire for this information. So we do need to also think about how to support parents in making these choices. And we also know from some of the national research in the Families and Media Initiative that parents' use of technology for their own learning is related to how much they use technology with their children for learning. So again, it's really important that we support parents in developing their repertoires with technology, which can vary widely from family to family. So just reiterating those 4 points, families used media strategically to teach and learn language. Families are using technology to make bridges between home and school. Technology could do more to help families understand schools, but also to help educators understand families. And access to quality content can be a challenge, so we need to support families. Finally, just a quick mention of a resource that we've created at the Families and Media Project. Diverse Families in Media Using Research to Inspire Design shares case studies of some of the families you heard about today, as well as others, as a way of inspiring new products or curricula or courses that you may want to give if you're an educator. So go onto the Cooney Center website and you can download that for free. Thank you.
Is the microphone's working. Yes, so my name is Eric Cuentos, and I work at Mission Graduates. As Bridget was introducing us earlier, we're an organization that's been around in the Mission District for over 40 years now, and for the last 10 years with a focus on helping students get into and graduate from college. We, in addition to doing the parent work, we also work with students. We have after-school programs. We have programs working with high school students, getting them into college and then through college. We started with the parents a while ago, about 6, 7 years ago, with the understanding that specifically with the population we're working with, primarily Latino students, mostly first generation, there's a lot of lack of information about what was needed to get children to college, and what was needed to help them academically on the way there. So that's what we started with. And then we decided, well, how do we get that information out to people? We knew we wanted to use, we decided that we use a model similar with a similar population, that's been effective in a similar population, which is that of a peer model, a peer education, a promotora model. And we just translated it from the public health world, where it's most commonly used, into an education world. So we have been training our promotoras, our parent promotoras, on the information that we knew they needed to get information out to other families initially about college and about academics. And then we started to realize 2 things. One was education was becoming more and more technologified. Had more technology in it. And then the other element was we were growing as a program. We needed a way to get in touch with these families, with our promotoras themselves. We needed to be able to coordinate and communication about calendars, to share information about what they needed to be sharing in their families, with our families. And they themselves didn't have, the promotoras we were working with didn't have access to that same kind of, they didn't feel comfortable using that technology. So we decided we needed to address both of those issues. And that's why we came up with the Latina Tech Mentorship Program, which was basically a way of partnering. Because we also knew, by the way, that some of the parents we'd worked with, some of our promotoras, had been a part of classes. They'd taken classes already. They had gone to the programs and had computers at home, and they sat on a shelf. They weren't being used enough. And so we knew we needed to get them a coach, someone to actually sort of hold their hand on that process to build their skills and mostly their confidence so that they were actually able to start using technology on a regular basis. And then the other thing we realized was that as we started doing that, the main reason for these parents to get excited about it, the main motivating factor for these parents or promotoras was actually because they saw that they could use this technology then to support their kids' education, which is perfectly natural. That's actually why we started working with these parents in the first place, because they're part of our program because they want to learn for themselves and for their own kids, as well as they want to be able to share that information to the families, to the families we work with, right? So I sort of decided to go. This is basically what I just described here. These are various programs. This is basically in addition to the, so we do the workshops in schools. We also teach ESL classes. We support parents to be leaders in their school governance groups, the ELACs. And then we have this leadership team, which are the people who are out there in the communities, actually out there in school sites. These are parents at these schools who then are sharing information, doing workshops, recruiting parents to come to these workshops. And here we had a year-end camping trip for them and their families. We got to say thank you. And we also recognize that that an important part of the support that they themselves are providing to their school is actually from their families themselves. So, so more information about the Madres Líderes, or parent promotoras, is basically that they are recognized. We identified them based on what we started talking to other parents. So who are you talking to? Who's out there? Who is everybody? Who does everybody know? We started talking to the school staff. And pretty much it's pretty clear after you spend just a little bit of time who the right people to go and talk to are. And so once you do, you start talking to them, and they are, even though they are leaders themselves, they in many cases don't speak English very well. They don't have access to computers, but they all have smartphones, right? Or if they do have access to computers, they just don't know how to use them. They don't feel comfortable using them, right? So that's when we decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to develop a program that helps parents to learn about what they can do to support effectively how to support their children effectively, how they could do their job with us better, and also, by the way, how they could then be more effective leaders in their school, and then also help develop a relationship that might help bridge communities. This is an example. I do want to point out this was a typo here on the certificate, so if any of you guys are Spanish speakers, I feel a little bit on edge, but I decided that the picture was worth it. So this is somebody who works at Double Dutch, it's a startup social media marketing firm, and they're based in the Mission, and we matched them up with one of our parent leaders to not only to help Josefina learn more skills, but also to help this Katie, who the Double Dutch staff person, learn more about people from their community where she's working, and create some bridges that way. So the Mission District is one would imagine actually there'd be more people like Katie who were able to support. However, one of the challenges we've actually found is that the families are only available to actually to do this kind of coaching sessions during work hours. So it's really hard to get people to stray outside their offices for an hour twice a month to actually go and to do these sessions. So that's actually one of the challenges we found. But anyway, here we are. So the program basically is we have these modules that sort of cover the basics of what we think we need to cover. Basically, the basics of using a computer, Google Docs, Facebook, certain apps. But these modules, the intention is for them not to be, you don't have to go through all of them. You don't have to use them all in order. And you don't only have to use them. You can definitely, the idea is it's individualized learning developed in partnership between the mentor and the mentee. And definitely the idea is to incorporate specific objectives that the parents want to learn as well. So, one example is one parent she has a passion for throwing parties, and whenever she throws parties, she likes to really have her own specialized decorations. And she's always gone to like the party store and bought like the stickers and everything. But she learned how to use Google Docs to be able to make her own custom decorations that look amazing, and now she's thinking about starting that as a business. And this was something just sort of motivated her own learning. That was a project that she worked on as well as working on how to use your email or how to use Google Calendar, that kind of thing. Other thing is we definitely have we do a survey before and a survey after. We try to compare. It's self-reported. It's definitely, the methodology is not perfect. And one of the things that we also have additional resources. We've definitely thrown in a lot of the resources that have come from Amber's research and from the Cooney Center in general. We're always collecting new information, new resources. So if anybody here has any interesting resources that they could share, we'd love to hear them. And then obviously empowering our mentees and mentors to share around as well. And we have a final presentation of learning, which was one of the more inspirational times I've been a part of. One example I want to share, we don't have any pictures of it here, but one parent actually was really interested in learning how to learn how to make a physical model of a house. Now, that's not really media-oriented, right? But how did she learn? Well, she learned on YouTube and, searching on the web, right? And the physical model, it's huge, it's about this big, was a project that she was able to work on with her kids and her parent and her partner together. And it actually was, and the process of doing it, which took like a month, was a really valuable time that they had together as a family, and allowed for them to connect. After they've been through a bunch of difficult challenges in their family, and so this is a great example of how technology can actually be a means to a totally non-technological end, right? So that was an example of a final presentation. Here's another final presentation. That's another parent, Promotora Julia, who is presenting about her home state of Yucatan, and she's wearing her Yucatan shirt. So some of the outcomes. So out of the 12 that were part of our initial pilot phase, 4 to 5 mentees actually are ready to become mentors themselves, which is the whole point. And then the average of improvement was about half of the different areas that we were measuring of improvement. We saw some level of improvement, which is actually quite amazing because really this is there's a lot that you can cover, so you actually end up having to sort of tailor the learning. Also, in the mentees, they also really appreciated how concrete the learning was and how patient their mentors were. And one of the things that was actually we heard a lot of, which was really interesting, was that the parents, especially the ones who had older kids, they said they really liked that they don't no longer have to depend on their kids for support. It helped, and especially, I've done some research. I'm not a researcher myself, but I've done some research, and I've noticed that within immigrant communities, one of the challenges that is a really common one is this one of students or the younger generation that grows up here has less of a sense of parenting from their parents, because their parents don't have access to all of the information and the cultural norms to support them. And so it can lead to some difficult sociological challenges. And this is another impact of the work we do, that we're trying to do, is that the mentors also, obviously besides the relationships, they really liked how this is a really flexible program. And that's both in terms of their own schedule, it's flexible based on what they can do, but also in terms of the curriculum that they can work on. So I think that pretty much covers all of the impact of all of the work I have. This is still very new, only 12 mentors. We're looking to expand by triple next year to about 35. Actually, I'll put it out there. If anybody's interested and is able to come to San Francisco twice a month to volunteer about an hour, and you can speak Spanish, we are very much interested in having your support. And I think I'll leave it there.
How are y'all doing? Looks like there's some technology taking place currently. Does this clicker work? How's that volume? Good? Great. I'm notoriously bad at operating microphones. And I don't like text messaging, which is going to be ironic very shortly. But I do it regularly because it's quick and efficient. My name is Ben. Thank you, Bridget and Amber and the TELOS group more broadly for inviting me to present. It's wonderful work that you're doing, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. As Bridget mentioned, I am one of the creators of Ready for K, a text messaging program for parents of preschoolers designed to stimulate parental involvement and foster child development. And I'm going to start with a little bit of motivation regarding why we developed this program. So despite the fact that virtually all parents want their children to succeed, research consistently shows large systematic differences in the home learning experiences of young children. For example, economically disadvantaged 0 to 2-year-olds receive less stimulating and responsive care than their wealthier counterparts, and they're more likely to experience harsh parenting. By the age of 4, poor children hear 30 million fewer words at home than wealthier children. These disparities, of course, have long-term consequences given strong links between parenting and child development. Typical parenting workshops can place significant demands on parents' time and effort, often requiring parents to attend sessions on a weeknight. And parents who do show up are generally inundated with a lot of information that can be difficult to remember and put into practice. Doctor and home visitation programs show promise, but doctor visits are infrequent, and home visitation programs are costly and generally difficult to scale. An alternative approach is to break down the complexity of parenting into small steps that are easy to achieve, provide continuous encouragement and support over extended periods of time, and leverage widely used technology to maximize reach and minimize cost. Text messaging is currently the ideal technology for this approach, as it's essentially ubiquitous. It has an amazing reach rate. Traditionally hard to reach families text with the highest frequency, and it's low cost and easy to scale. In addition, it has proven efficacy in similar applications. In healthcare, texting's led to improvements in a range of outcomes from smoking cessation to weight loss, and in education has driven improvements in grade point average and college matriculation. Taking insights from these programs, We, Susanna Loeb and myself, Susanna Loeb's a professor at Stanford and a wonderful woman in general, developed Ready for K, a school year-long text messaging program for parents of 4-year-olds that's designed to enhance their default behaviors, the things they do automatically with their children, by showing them how to exploit everyday learning opportunities in fun and easy ways. The program draws on multiple strands of research. It's linked to early learning standards. It's structured as a curriculum, and it's translated into multiple languages. The original program focused on parents' home literacy practices, and each week we would send parents 3 texts per week. I guess I didn't need to say per week there. It was a little bit redundant. I'm trying to get more engagement. So let's. I'm going to pause for a minute. It's 3 talks in a row can be kind of tough. So let's make it interactive for a moment, because I don't like standing on a stage and talking at people. And this is just kind of a dumb thing, but I'm going to do it anyway. Who sends text messages? What? Okay, better question. Who doesn't send text messages? What? Hey. Not at all, ever. So there's one who sends text messages infrequently. And this just sort of speaks to the sort of pervasiveness of text messaging in our lives. In any case, the original Ready for K program that we put together focuses on literacy. We sent parents 3 texts per week. On Mondays, we sent fact texts. These were designed to inform and motivate parents by highlighting the importance of particular early literacy skills in compelling but impactful terms. On Wednesdays, we send tip texts, which include activities that parents can do that build on existing family routines, but also help develop the skill of the week. And then on Fridays, we send growth messages, which are designed to reinforce the importance of the topics of the week, provide a little bit of encouragement, and then to extend the text from Wednesday. Tip from Wednesday, excuse me. Here's an example. Fact: letters are the building blocks of written language. Children need to know the letters to learn how to read and write. Tip: point out the first letter in your child's name in magazines, on signs, and at the store. Make it a game. Who can find the most? Growth: keep pointing out letters. You're preparing your child for K. Now when you point out a letter, ask, what sound does it make? I'll pause while y'all take photos. I can do a little dance over here. I get kind of squirmy when I sit and wait for a presentation, so you probably are picking up on that, but I'm unabashed about it, so that's something. People are laughing a little. My wife doesn't know what to make of my sort of general approach to life, and she is a little bit more reserved than me, and I think I embarrass her always, but it's a nice balance. Another example, centered around bath time. Fact: bath time is great for building important skills for K. Start by asking your child, what are the things we need for bath time? Why? Tip: when you're bathing your child, point out the letters on shampoo bottles. Ask your child to name them and the sounds that they make. Growth: keep using bath time to prepare your child for K. Ask, what rhymes with tub, soap, and bubble? Double in trouble is the answer to the last one. I even got a smile from Amber. Yes. That's true, you have. Yeah. In any case, to evaluate the program, we conducted a randomized control trial in San Francisco, Unified, in which half of the parents received the Ready for K program, half received placebo messages, 1 every 2 weeks, generally pertaining to kindergarten enrollment requirements. And what we found is that parents read, used, and found the text very helpful. These are pretty large effects, up to 0.6 standard deviations. Ready for K parents reported being more involved at home than non-Ready for K parents, engaging in more home literacy activities. I'm going to sidetrack for a minute and defend parent self-reports a little bit. They have limitations, but at a minimum, they suggest that parents are internalizing the information, and I think we think that that's the sort of first step to behavior change. So even if it's just a psychological effect, it's still an effect. I mean, we want the behaviors, obviously, but this is a step in that direction. According to teachers who are blind to randomization, parents were more involved at school, asking more questions about how their children were doing in school, their interests, and even things they can do at home to help their kids learn to read. And then ultimately, children of Ready for K parents gained an additional 2 to 3 months of learning in some, but not all areas of early literacy. Giving voice to these findings, one parent said, "What I like most about Ready for K is that it has allowed me to build a closer relationship with my son. Because of Ready for K, my son has told me that he loves learning new things. Before the texts, I wasn't really involved in my son's class or getting to know what his strengths were and what he needed to improve in. I love Ready for K and truly believe my child will be more than ready." So not a bad quote, I would say, and makes us feel really good. Clearly, I picked a very good one. I mean, they were all pretty good, but in any case, this kind of typified the survey feedback that we got from parents. Last year, we conducted a follow-up study in which we texted the original cohort of parents for a second year. We also texted a new group of parents and found that effects persisted among returning parents and positive effects on families new to the study. Also in that study, among parents in the treatment group, we split the group such that half received general messages and half received personalized messages tailored to the child's learning level, drawing on information that we obtained from parents at baseline, and then also teachers provided us with formative assessment data throughout the year. And we found that the personalized messages were more effective for families who were in the study for their second year, potentially owing to the novelty of the approach, as well as for new parents whose children were higher achieving. In general, our messages target the median or a little bit below, so it's not surprising to find that result either. In the last year, we've grown from serving about 1,250 families in the Bay Area to over 30,000 in more than 20 states. We've developed math and SEL programs for parents of 4-year-olds, as well as a literacy program for parents of kindergartners. We're currently running a bunch of different studies where we're analyzing different aspects of our model. For example, comparing the fact tip growth model to just sending tips. We're also looking at other aspects of the program like message timing and dosage, and we're evaluating programs in new content areas such as math and SEL. Next year, we'll look at a program that adds links to the messages to see if the approach can be used to sort of scaffold on additional, more complex behaviors. Our long-term goal is pretty simple: to support as many families as possible. And the program is free and easy to implement, so if there's any interest, feel free to reach out to myself or Susanna. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to Bridget and to Amber for inviting me to participate. I'm glad to be here with this distinguished group and with these distinguished speakers to share something of my research as well. My name is Carlin, and I come from SRI Education, and the research I'll present on today is actually joint with colleagues at the Center for Children and Technology in New York, and I'll particularly focus on mathematics for preschoolers. So a little bit of background. Ready to Learn is actually a large federal initiative that aims to develop media resources and technologies that can help kids prepare for and be ready to achieve at kindergarten that are from less advantaged economic circumstances. And so the idea is to be as ready to learn as kids from higher income and higher support backgrounds. And so for 25 years, the program has been producing through public media, PBS and their producers, high quality videos and apps and games and tablet technologies these last couple of years that are intended to serve that outcome. Another important part of the effort, though, is to also support a relatively large research effort that looks at the efficacy of these resources over time and in communities that they're intended to support and reach. So why early mathematics learning? In brief, a quick thing you can walk away with. Research on early literacy is a little bit more mature as a field. Research on early math is a little bit more in the nascent phase. But what we do know so far from looking at early math is that early math learning predicts at least as well and perhaps a little better how well a child will do, not just in mathematics and STEM when they get to later phases of their education, but actually also across discipline to literacy achievement, high school completion, and also matriculation to college. So there's a lot of reason to think that early mathematics is a way to make sure that kids have the best possible, strongest possible start to their educations before they get to school. And so there's been a large push the last 10 years to develop school-based programs around early mathematics. But there's every reason to think that there is a lot that parents of all kinds can do to support their kids' math learning at home, given the right amount of support and the right amount of right kind of resources. And so this research actually took place that I'll share with schools that we had been working with on a school-based program where kids were taking advantage of interactive whiteboards and tablet technologies in their preschool. These are Head Start and mostly the preschools that serve predominantly lower income kids. So when we decided that we wanted to focus on a home-based experience, the preschools were eager to recommend families to take part in doing some of these activities at home, which would complement what they were doing at school already. And so the study had 3 different kinds of research questions, and these are the families of research questions. I won't bore you with the 15 actual research questions, but essentially we were looking at 3 different dimensions. First and most importantly, we wanted to see what the characteristics were of this family and child engagement at home. What were the social arrangements? Were the kids playing by themselves? Were they engaging with their caregivers and their parents as we had intended? Were their siblings involved? Were their grandparents involved? Were their neighbors involved? So what were all of the different arrangements that were in place as kids were engaging with resources? Second, I'll describe the program in a minute, but we were really interested to see whether with modest supports and modest resources, we could actually see changes in the ways that parents and caregivers thought about their role and enacted their role when they were thinking about how to support their kids' learning. And then finally, this is also very important for our sponsors of the Department of Education, we're always looking at whether or not there was a difference in kids' mathematical skills. And then we also, as a bonus, since the program the resources come from a program called Peg Plus Cat. Quick show of hands if you've seen or heard of Peg Plus Cat, especially parents of kids, younger kids, or if you have a fetish for kids media, which no judgment here. Peg is a relatively recent addition to the PBS universe, but she's become a pretty popular one, and it's very exciting. This is a gender aside that PBS is making an effort to make sure that there's more gender balance to their lead characters, and so Peg's an example of a show that's built around a girl character, which is also focused on STEM, which is kind of doubly awesome. So putting back my researcher hat, we also were interested, the program not only focuses on mathematics, but it also focuses on problem solving and the degree to which problem solving requires both social interaction, so asking for help, working together to solve a problem, and also kind of being interested enough and passionate enough and having enough determination to stick with a problem even if it gets tough. And so we actually looked at approaches to learning skills, which are dimensions of social and emotional learning or behavior that center around these behaviors of problem solving and social approaches to solving problems. So those are the things we were looking for. The arrangement of resources is not dissimilar from what you heard from Ben or from Amber a little bit. We'd given them a suggested set of activities, and so there are members of my research group that have now flashbacks when they hear the Peg Plus Cat song, because we did a full inventory of all of the assets that they had to make sure that we were focusing and making the best recommendation. So we curated an experience that included videos, it included interactive games, both online and on tablets. Because of the persistent fact of the digital divide in this country, we did make sure to provide families with both devices and connectivity. We have a very generous sponsor that actually provided lifetime connectivity for the devices. So the families that in the program actually kept the devices and had a lifetime data plan. So as long as the device was functioning, they would continue to have data on these devices at home in perpetuity. And then we provided a modest set of, so the resources were collected in a content management system, which looks like a simple website. And then we provided a set of supports for families. So we provided a set of tip sheets in 3 languages, in English, in Spanish, and in Chinese. The sample of families was about a third Latino, about a third Chinese, and about a third African American and Caucasian. So it was a very diverse sample, California and New York families. And then we designed this 3-month experience with a poster that you put on the fridge that showed you what to do. And the families would come in for an orientation session. They then came in for a midpoint check, and then we were on call if they had problems during the study, if they had difficulty with technology or questions about how to interact with their kids. And then along the lines of what Ben suggested, so we had one small dimension of our study, which was Ben's main focus of his research, but we had text messages as an option that families could opt into. The idea being what Ben said, that if you give families a chance to come in, they have to come in on a weeknight. Even if you feed them pizza, you're imposing on their time, and then you're trying to dump on them a tremendous amount of very well-intentioned resources and information, but it can be tough. So we took the approach of giving families an orientation session where we just showed them what was available, and then we gave them weekly, 3 times a week, we'd give them a text message that would kind of walk them through the experience. And the texts were available in the language that they preferred, as long as they preferred one of the 3 languages we were able to work in. We did have one staff member that translated into Farsi for a recent immigrant family, but it's one-off, and anyway, it's a long story. Mostly the 3 languages, English, Chinese, and Spanish. And then we offered then we set the families free, and this happened from October into January of last year, and so this happened over the Thanksgiving holidays and the winter break, and that's when it all took place. In terms of the data we collected, just very briefly, we had the logs from all the devices, so we knew exactly when the apps were being accessed, when the videos were being watched, and we didn't know all we wanted to know about the social context, but we did ask families to fill out a weekly media diary, which randomly chose a day of the week and asked families to reflect on that day's activities, so we knew something about the social context in which families were engaging. And then we also followed up in 10% of families with a multiple visit protocol where we actually stopped by the family home at different times of day and week to actually hang out and just watch what they were up to and see what they were getting up to with the technology. We did a pre-post parent attitude survey, and then we did an early math skills assessment that was aligned to the skills of the intervention but not to the intervention experience itself. And then we also, for approaches to learning, since we were in relationship with their preschools, we actually asked the teachers who were blind to condition to give a rating for the kids pre and post to see if they noticed at school a difference in emotional regulation and problem solving and persistence. So that was the full universe. Kind of broad, but we were trying to learn a lot. So what did we learn about engagement? This is a terrible graphic. It's a little bit like Napoleon going to Moscow and back. It actually contains a lot, if you can be patient with me for just half a second. So what you see going left to right with the bars is actually the amount of engagement that the families had with the materials as intended. And so as you can see from weeks 1 through 12, you get almost to 100% of families engaging with almost 100% of the resources. What you see with the line, though, is even more interesting. We had really, as I said, curated these resources very thoughtfully and carefully, and we thought about sequence, and we thought about what you'd want to do after you see this video is really go to this app and have this conversation, and we were doing everything we could to be supportive. What the families did, in fact, was dive right in and make whatever they wanted of the situation. So not only did they engage 100% at the start, and they dropped off to less than half by week 9 because they'd exhausted the resources, but they also, the data suggested that they just really followed their interest, and they followed the lead of the kids and the parents and what they were wanting to do. They also engaged a whole lot more than we expected. The intervention itself was supposed to be 45 minutes a week. We found that families were engaging between 45 minutes, well, initially, between 45 minutes and up to 2 hours a week, depending on their level of interest. But then they were exhausting what was available in this special walled garden that we'd created, and they were diminishing in their engagement with these resources. So that's the story of engagement. We saw an awful lot of it, but it didn't happen in the way that we had anticipated. So that's something to talk about together. We also saw that there were significant changes in behavior. So with this modest set of suggestions about how to engage, we were seeing more joint engagement and family engagement together. We were seeing more parents endorsing the idea that they could make a difference in kids' learning, and also more of a focus on problem solving as a normal, regular part of family conversation. Math skills. The kids actually had really interesting math skills learning outcomes. In terms of positive outcomes, when it comes to less conventional mathematics like ordinal numbers, first floor, second floor, third floor, when it comes to spatial relationships, behind the chair, beside the chair, when it comes to 3D shapes. These are things that are less focused on not only by lower income families, but by all families. When you talk about early math, people talk about numbers and counting and number identification. And if you get really fancy, they think about operations. But most families don't think about geometry, spatial relationships, 3D figures. So what we saw, we think, is the fact that these mathematics were not being focused on by any families, except the families in this intervention. And so you saw clearer signs of uptake and differences in skills, less so in measurable attributes, patterns, counting, 2D shapes, which are covered by most families, including the control families. I should have said up front, this was a 2-condition randomized experimental design with 200 families. So half of them were in the treatment and half of them assigned to the business as usual control. I'll stop there. I'm eager to talk about all sorts of things, family, home, and technology and media. Publications are coming out of this work. If you're interested in the last 5 years of public media and early learning, I've got some print copies of a resource that are hot off the presses that I'm happy to share, and I'm eager to participate in the conversation.
We have time for a few questions.
Thank you to all presenters. Amber, you mentioned the importance of quality content and for parents to know how to reach it. And in this final presentation, we heard or we saw examples of what I believe to be good quality content. So I was wondering whether you could elaborate a little bit on the information that exists out there for researchers and practitioners in terms of forms of frameworks for assessment of good quality digital content, blueprints, models, etc.
No, yeah, for sure. As Amber said in her talk, there is a tremendous appetite and a relative dearth of resources. So there are organizations like Common Sense Media and others that have done a lot these last few years to try and give guidance and to make that guidance principled and based in the learning sciences. But I would say that at this point, the quantity of resources is so vast, and the time and effort dedicated to helping to curate it and catalog it is modest. And so it continues to be an issue, at least in the families that we work with. That the appetite for it is still exceeds the support that's available. So people tend to trust venue. They tend to trust their friends, the teachers in their lives. I can't get out of parties or planes without recommending a video or a character. But it's less established as a set of supports than you'd like. Do you?
Yeah, I don't think there's a gold standard yet. There are these resources like Common Sense Media, Children's Technology Review that give reviews, or some give awards. But I think you find that not all families are reaching even these sort of informal types of assessments. And, it's very overwhelming if you shop the App Store, right? You just get a barrage. There's millions of apps out there. I think for children's literacy, there's 80,000. And there was a report by the Cooney Center recently that looked at things like whether the companies had a research person at all or used research in some way, and it's a very small percentage. So it's still kind of the Wild West, so to speak, as far as that. Did you want to?
I just wanted to add one more thing that we're seeing is actually librarians, both public libraries as well as school libraries. Actually, as a matter of fact, we partner a lot with the school librarians at the schools we're at, because they're trying to get out to the message about this various reading app to their families, and we're helping them to get that message out.
And I would say for the educators in the room that's a role you can play. If you try out apps and you see things that you think, well, wow, this really gets at what I'm doing in the classroom, recommending that to families is a big service you can do, and a lot of families will want to know.
I think we have almost exhausted our audience, but not yet. I think there's some more questions probably that are lingering, but I'll take the mic for a second. So your presentations were wonderful and engaging. And I'm just curious if each of you could talk a little bit about what do you think schools, principals, superintendents, or the tech industry might do to be able to take advantage of some of the insights that the research is showing.
Yeah, I guess I can jump in. So there's our solutions like available off the shelf. So that's sort of one obvious way that educators can take advantage, is just to adopt programs that already exist. I would add to the earlier comments that there is an increasing amount, clearly, of research on ed tech interventions, especially in early childhood education. And so while there is sort of a lack of understanding about what high quality approaches look like, I think that's poised to change relatively quickly. The Joan Ganz Cooney Center has a sort of web repository of high quality interventions that you might look to, and they really prioritize having a strong research base. Tap, Click, Read, I think, is the report that you had referenced. More generally, just reading research sort of broadly is always kind of a nice approach. It's though not the sort of most time-efficient thing to do. So I think there is potentially a need for someone or an organization to sort of distill research findings into digestible nuggets that are actionable. Academia isn't particularly good at promoting research, and especially in an easy-to-understand way. So those are just some thoughts.
This is a question about and I don't know if you've done your studies touched into this, but one question I have when you're looking at apps that take sort of like when looking at math, for example, and you take what could be a kinesthetic experience of counting or the different moving blocks and gathering them and creating sets physically, but you flatten them into a screen kind of setting. Have you looked at how that transition affects especially on the math learning in children at that age?
Yeah, not in our research particularly, but the approach that we tend to take is that replicating experiences that are better as 3D, real-life, physical object experiences is not a best practice when it comes to apps and technologies. So what you want in an app or a technology is to do something that's different and special and unique that really gives a complement to all the other really excellent things that should be happening. And our interventions tend to actually have extension activities or complementary activities that are tabletop-based instead. So mostly we try and do things that are really hard and expensive to do, expensive usually in terms of time. So like tangrams are really wonderful, but they're really hard to do a lot of in a physical environment, and they require quite a bit of setup, whereas an app can do them quickly, one after the other, until you're exhausted. And so thinking about what the special affordances are of technology tends to be where we're focused.
And I would add to that, soon virtual reality is going to be in play. And that will sort of potentially help with that.
I think it's also, what would the alternative be? Would you have the physical thing with you in the car or wherever you are? And then, what's the trade-off there?
There's a lot of really incredible interventions that you all are talking about, and I'm wondering if in a space that is so explicitly dedicated to the equity framework, if we can think about how to justify our work by drawing on research that's maybe not coming from a deficit discourse around sensory deprivation and a word gap, which I think has come to be reified and taken up in ways that are really potentially damaging to the communities that we're talking about supporting. So I guess I'm just wondering sort of what research do we draw on to really justify the work that we're doing in a way that avoids those discourses?
Hopefully you didn't take that framing from my presentation. If you did, I want to hear what that was. But I think that we can draw on literature. For example, if you look at Guadalupe Valdez's work here at Stanford, or Claude Goldenberg, who are really looking at what are families' practices at home, and can we learn about that and not see it as something that's, what's missing, but see what's there, and look at the strengths that families bring, and really try to think about, well, what does it take for families who come from this kind of a conceptual framing, right, in their lives, to understanding the way that schools work in this country, which maybe we take it for granted that they're logical, but there may be a lot of things that are very difficult to understand about how they work, and try to empathize with that. And so those researchers that I mentioned have looked at the way that different families approach literacy at home. And if educators might say, well, they don't read to their kids the way that, I might expect a family to, but actually maybe they have an oral storytelling tradition, or maybe they have different practices that we should be looking at and we should be building on and recognizing in our classrooms. So you can kind of turn the deficit around and see what's not being done in schools.
That's an amazing question, and also an incredibly complex one, mostly because the deficit framing is, so I totally agree with you that moving beyond that is the ideal, but it resonates with people who fund the type of work that we do, so much so that repeatedly we're asked if there's a similar sort of word gap statistic in math, because wouldn't that be great? So it's the status quo isn't ideal, but moving, it doesn't sort of immediately come to mind how we might move beyond it. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, and I'm not entirely sure how to approach it. I would say, though, that there's this interesting finding in behavioral economics that pertains to this very topic, and it relates to a concept called loss aversion, that essentially individuals hate losses twice as much as they like equivalent gains, and it's sort of a similar sort of thing. So I don't know. It's hard. It's a great question, but really tricky.
Yeah. And just to build a little bit and answer Bridget's question from before, I think one of the things that you heard in all the presentations is that with a little bit of support, some really interesting things and really powerful things can happen, and that at heart, all parents want to do what they can to support their kids in learning and in having more choices and in having more of a voice and a say over what happens to them in their futures. And so I think that the idea that building on, as Amber said, what is present in their lives, or what could be present with a little bit of effort or a little bit of intervention, like Ben was saying, like it's just 3 text messages a week, and yet you can see a trajectory being changed. Like I think that's a really interesting place to start.
And lastly, I'd add our approach when we work with the members in our community is one, to try to bring excitement around all that's happening in education, and more have families want to join us in that excitement of seeing what's happening in their classrooms and how can you be a part of it. So it's one of kind of welcoming them into the fray to accept technology, and not overtly being condescending over what you don't have and we're here to get it to you, but more trying to build community, and here's another aspect where you can get on board, get engaged with your child's education. And so I think there's a positive tone there that might not be research-based, but it comes with those very important interpersonal interactions that we have that are important as we address this issue.
And Eric, you want to add? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I think it might be interesting for you to have the last word on this.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I'm not as research-based as some of the other folks on the panel, but I definitely feel that a resource that I would encourage schools to look at, as well as technology to look at, are the parents themselves. There is a great deal of information, and there's a great deal of power that comes from a person-to-person interaction. You're much more likely to act on something when someone that you know, that you trust, and that you see every day tells you to do something than if it were someone who kind of flies in, tells you you're doing it wrong, this is how you should do it, and then walks away. Again, it's a complex issue, obviously, but the model of peer-to-peer is one that I fully believe in, partly for that reason.
Okay, thank you. Emma, thank you for
Thanks for actually embodying how we wanted to end the seminar series. And that is by not having answers, but actually posing more questions. And thank you, panelists, for pointing out not all questions start with research. Sometimes they start with practice and being grounded in where people are. And as you can tell from the mix on the panel, that was part of what we wanted to honor in the seminar. So those of you that tend to apologize for not being research, or those of you that tend to bound your research, we're trying to break some of those boundaries and look at the whole complex way we can think about education's digital future and how we get equity by design or by intention. I want to thank you. I know we have a vast array of you that have been devotees of the seminar series, and I think that's made a big difference in the level of conversation. You get a little reprieve on your refreshment ticket tonight because the post-seminar survey is slightly more complex than what we've been asking week after week, and we thought it wasn't quite fair to hold that between you and the buffet table. So we will be using your registration information to send out a survey. We really would appreciate your feedback. It's got a mix of what did you get out of the seminar sessions you attended, as well as where would you like us to take some of this work. We've got 3 more years of funding to do something, and we don't want to stop here and now, and we don't want to be limited by the way we have been doing it. So we're going to seek input from you. We have a fantastic lineup of leaders for our campfire chats. So the tables are set with their usual mix of the glowing campfire and the chocolates. So after you visit the buffet, please find a campfire chat that's interesting to you. And then finally, I just want to say thank you and to celebrate this seminar. These 9 weeks have been amazing. This is just 1/9 of the amazing speakers that we've had, but I hope you join me in a big round of applause for both the group that's present tonight and who they represent across the 9 weeks.